Well, thank you so much. Welcome everyone to today's Paul K. Longmore Institute on Disability Crit Camp Conversation, an intergenerational panel discussion. I don't know if anyone missed the original slides for captions. You can hit the closed caption button and you can also read them directly from Stream Text, and the link is in the chat box. Also, if you're tweeting or posting on Facebook or anything, we're using the hashtag CritCamp. Thank you so much again for joining. My name is Andrea Levant, and I am a CritCamp co-impact producer alongside my dear friend and colleague, Stacy Park. Together, we are charged with leveraging the messages in this amazing film to advance social change. Today, I am joined by Anita Cameron, who is the Director of Minority Outreach for Not Dead Yet, but has been involved in social justice and change activism for 38 years, including 34 years of organizing in the disability rights movement with ADAPT. Vilissa Thompson is a macro-minded social worker from South Carolina. Ramp Your Voice is her organization where she discusses the issues that matter to her as a Black disabled woman, including intersectionality, racism, politics, and why she unapologetically makes good trouble. Jim Labrecht is one of the co-directors of Crit Camp with the award-winning director Nicole Newnham. He's a former camper at Camp Jeanette and has been mixing sound for documentaries for 25 years. And then finally, we have Sam Hengesbach, who is a gender fluid intersectional activist. They are 21 years old and have been practicing activism since they were 16. As a Longmore Student Fellow, they're in a place that does more than embrace their disability and makes practicing disability activism feel like a joy-filled community. So thank you all so much for joining us today. We've been really excited about this conversation. Let's start out with just kind of a general question for anyone that wants to answer. Can you describe some of your personal connections or reactions to Crit Camp?
I'll go. This is Vilissa, and I had the privilege to see Crit Camp at Sundance during its debut, and being there to see it was a phenomenal experience. To be in the room and hearing the laughs when the parts were funny, hearing the kind of, the heart pounding, or the parts that really touch you. And at the end, I had the opportunity to meet Jim and Nicole to discuss the film afterwards, and I was just really amazed at the love that was in that film. I think sometimes when you watch documentaries, the feeling of it can be so objective, can be so just, this is a film that I care about, and it can be kind of cold. But for me, you could just tell that Crit Camp was a passion project that was just so well loved, and storytelling was so amazing. And I really saw the tremendous effort in getting to meet Jim afterwards, which just really solidified those feelings that I got. I'm not one of the people who cry at films, but I cried afterwards. It was just so emotional to watch and to really see disability displayed in a way that was empowering, that was truthful, that was not for the non-disabled gaze, that was for us. And it's really good to have a film that's just for us as a people. We don't have a lot of films that's made by us, told for us, and doesn't lean into inspirational porn territory. So I just felt that it really set a standard in what disability filmmaking can be when it comes to, doing a dual purpose of telling our own perspectives and adding that disability history lens too.
Thanks, Vilissa.
Thank
Anyone
you.
else?
Actually, I have a thing that when I was watching the film, I started writing on my phone my thoughts. Do you mind if I share that?
Please do.
Okay, so when you're doing activism when you're young, like personally, like I didn't have a mentor. I didn't really have anyone guiding me or like a community around me to be like, yeah, let's do this together and like we'll figure it out together, or like have someone be like, this is the right thing to do. I was like constantly figuring out things on my own. So like every time I look at like when I was looking at the camper footage in particular, it like filled me with all this like inspiration, and like it made me smile so much to think that like people were organizing together in that way around disability. And like it just like it also makes me feel like I have a hole in my heart where I never got to experience something like that. And when I like and I was always questioning myself when I was doing activism when I was younger, when I was going up to like school boards and like talking with like the principal of my school about like student rights and things of that nature. Because like when I was younger, I really focused in on like trans rights and LGBT rights. And now that like I actually had got to go to college and enter an academic space, that's where I got to learn about disability activism and really like further my activist abilities and persona. But like watching that, I was like, how do I get to the utopia of like just a place where everyone's just hanging out or having fun and everyone just believes in like the same thing, that like everyone deserves to feel like they belong. And that's what Crip Camp really did. It made you feel like everyone belongs like in the world, where like when it comes to disability, like there's just so much that is like alienating, and there's so much guilt tripping that like able-bodied people like make disability people feel, and it's such an awful tangled web. And then you just look at like the sunny pictures of like Camp Jen, and I was like, how do I go there? Like, and it's not there anymore. And like that's the really big thing that like I feel is disheartening as a youth activist as well, is that we watch all this older stuff about how they did it back in the day, and then we had to recreate something of our own and do activists today, where things are completely different and like the barriers are so intense to getting people out the door. And so like I remember watching Paris is Burning, and it gave me like a really similar feeling of like this is like the LGBT like Black ballroom culture was like so inspiring about how people came together and formed community in that way. And then the very same thing like happened in Crip Camp, where like people were just like the whole thing was just like it started from having fun and just being friends and singing together. And that's just I didn't get anything like that in camp. Where's my camp? Where's my camp?
Same.
There's a camp, yeah. So it's like this whole like I love it because it gives a great example, but it's also at the same time it's like I don't have that, and I feel like that can be disheartening of like people don't know like that they can do those things too, and that doesn't have to look exactly like that.
That's good. That's good. Jim, what's your, even to these responses, what's kind of how are you feeling even since the film's release, just about the responses like Sam and Vilissa?
Well, needless to say, it's so meaningful and really touches me when I hear that the thing that Nicole and I created being so well embraced by people, and the sense of that it's being finally told from our perspective, from the inside, and that anyway, thank you for those kind remarks. Coming together at Camp Jened, it's a combination of things. It's the environment you're in. I mean, you could have had those people at a camp that was just very, if that place was like some of the other camps that were rather infantilizing or really weren't treating us as, being teenagers and not just people in wheelchairs, things would have been a lot different. But it was the combination of the times, of the social upheaval and evolutions that were happening in the early 70s. And fortunately, having people like Judy Heumann there, who, when I was there in 71, she had just prevailed in that lawsuit to get her teaching position at the New York City Department of Education. And for me, being 15 years old and realizing, knowing that things felt very unfair, and that we can fight back, we can sue. People aren't just going to tell us to go away because that's your lot in life. it was so empowering to be with her and see that there was something possible. I wish I wish people didn't have a hard time finding community, but as Sam was saying, I think it's still hard for some folks to find community, especially if you're geographically isolated. I think that's really difficult. And we had a few things that were kind of up in the editing room. And one of the things was just the word community on a poster, on a Post-it, because the film is about community.
That's awesome. Thank you so much. Anita, Sam, and Vilissa, this is kind of directed towards you all. I know in chatting with each of you individually, it's clear that one of the issues with organizing is that movements often focus on telling a single story, typically without representation of other identities. And each of you have multiple identities that support your organizing work. So I'm wondering, what has and does organizing look like for you, and why is it important given your multiple identities? Anita, I'd love for you to specifically speak to your experiences joining ADAPT.
Oh, wow. Well, so I got involved in social justice and at the age of 16. And it was exciting because I was this young person finding my voice. But I noticed that each of the organizations that I joined, whether it was in the anti-nuclear, whether it was in the women's movement, or dealing with
I think we lost your sound, Anita. There you are.
Okay, all right. And dealing with organizing in the queer community, I noticed that I was either the only Black person or the only disabled person. And then I found ADAPT, and it was very diverse as far as racially diverse. And there were people that looked like me. And it was more than just one or two or three. We weren't tokens. We were a significant part of my chapter. And so that it resonated with me, because here it is, I found, that I'm with people who are also disabled and they look like me, and, they're poor like me. And so I felt that I had found a home. And the direct action approach appealed to me, and the marches and the nonviolent civil disobedience and the whole just kind of shutting it down. I was born in 1965, so excuse me, I was too young to, take part in the civil rights movement and fight for the rights, of Black folks. And I felt guilty for that. Like, I was born too late. And I wanted to fight to make this world a better place for, all people. And I found that I fit, I fit in, if you will, to adapt being disabled. When I joined, most of the folks used wheelchairs, and I didn't at the time. I had my tactile cane. So at the time, my disabilities were very hidden. And so that was an interesting situation, barrier, if you will. I mean, back then, I mean, and even to this day now, we're out there, organizing and marching and doing direct action and stuff. People assumed that if you were walking, that you were non-disabled, um, and if you were non-disabled, therefore you were the leader, if you will, um, and could control these folks who in wheelchairs, or what you did would impact. And so um, we insisted that the media, when they would approach and all, would approach and deal with people who had visible disabilities, who used wheelchairs and all. And I got that. Um, I understood that intellectually, but yeah, it seemed that a lot of people thought that, well, adapt is just for people in wheelchairs. Um, and so that was something that we had to overcome over the years, the decades, because I joined ADAPT in 1986, which was 3 years after its inception in Chicago. ADAPT started out in Denver, Colorado in 1983. And there's a whole story behind that. And I joined in 1986 in Chicago at the age of 21. And so over the years, obviously, ADAPT grew. It became more cross-disability. It became more queer-friendly. I'm pretty sure I was the first out queer person in ADAPT. That was back in the 80s and scarier times. And so, yeah, but then, that was how that began for me. And so, yeah, I think I'm gonna stop right here. And
No, I
because I
love
could
it.
go on for hours and hours. So
Yeah, we're gonna get you. We're like, Anita is all of the conversations we can get you, and we love just hearing these stories. So thank you so much, Sam, Vilissa. Just again, with regard to kind of the multiple identity question, and anything that you would add.
I think for me, I've been doing my activism for the past 7 years, and it's just been really important for us to have more diverse voices. I know that's something that I shared with Jim about. One of the things I did enjoy about Crip Camp was the effort in having disabled perspectives that we don't normally see. Like, he was going into a little detail about the Black Panther involvement and Brad Lomax, his involvement in that. Having other Black disabled figures, in the film, and make me think about how when we talk about disability history, disabled people of color are left out, and due to the whitewashing and the erasure and the racism within the community. So it was very refreshing to see someone of the older generation, understand the importance of being as intersectional as possible, and knowing that, there's still room for improvement in what they're doing, come next. And, so I think that for me, just ensuring that everybody is seen, that type of representation is so important, whether it's in television, whether it's film, whether it's books, or just the visibility of stock images, or the voices, that you stumble upon online or in the history books. So just ensuring that everybody has that visibility. I think that's so important. I know that's something that drives me in my work, particularly in ensuring that Black disabled women and families are seen. And I know that's, in the first maybe 2 years of doing this work, having Black disabled women and families find me, and saying, thank you for your perspective. That's so humbling. When you just living your life and realizing that representation has always been there and somebody else feels seen and validated, you realize how important this work is and how it is much bigger than just you.
And Sam, I know yes, I would love to hear your thoughts.
All right, let me take a crack at this. So I think the most important part of having multiple identities when doing activism and organizing is that you have this thoughtfulness that is innately inside you. And that's why I think things like intersectional feminism are so important, because I get to carry all of my parts of my identity to every part of my activism. So I get to when I'm doing disability stuff, I can be oh, you need to make sure this language is more inclusive to trans people. And then I go organize a drag show with my college queer club. And then I'm oh, you need to make these rows accessible to people with wheelchairs. You can't put the rows that close together. And so you just get when you are in touch with all those intersections, and you're always keeping in mind every facet that people can feel and experience, that's incredibly powerful to be that kind of thoughtful. And it's so important to just remember everything that people can be when you're doing things. And that's I feel that's what I really get out of my multiple personalities is being that person in the room and being hey, you need to put accommodations here, or hey, you need to do this, making everything better and just working together with people.
Can I jump in here for a second?
I was going to ask you to, so please do.
Well, I mean, one thing that I think is really important, that I certainly had started being an activist at a rather young age. And what I just felt like I needed to say something so many times in so many situations. And it wasn't just for me, it was for everybody else in the community that was going to come across this architectural barrier or this lack of accessibility in other areas. And that I think that people ask themselves, what can I do? I think that if you feel comfortable, you should say something. I was at a film festival a number of years ago, and where they didn't really have a designated wheelchair seating area, but I was kind of over to the side, and I really wanted to move more towards the center. So they moved a bunch of chairs that were just folding chairs out of the way so I could get over there. And they started putting them all around me again. And I said, wait a second, that's a fire hazard. You can't block my access to the door with this. Do I enjoy confronting people? No. Is it something that's hard for a lot of people to do? Yes. But if you're looking for simple things to do and you feel like you want to give it a go, I just say something. And you kind of get used to it after a while,
That's good. So, thank you, Jim. One kind of follow-up to that, when we were thinking about the multiple identities that I know, and even in our conversations that we've had, thinking about some of the reactions to diversity or perhaps lack thereof in the film, how will that play a role for you in increasing diversity moving forward as a white disabled filmmaker who can actually call out some of your peers to push themselves and take it even beyond perhaps what Crip Camp did?
I know about the criticism for some other documentaries that we know, that have been made, and the lack of diversity or representation in them. And when Nicole and I first started working on the film, this is one of the things we talked about together, saying we didn't, I don't know what the right way to say it, but we weren't going to make that mistake. And that we were really going to dig really hard to make sure that we could tell as much of the story from as many different perspectives as possible. With that said, what we've also been telling anybody that'll listen to us, that this is just one story. This is a story about a particular point in time, specific group of people, and that there are many other stories out there that are just as interesting, just as important, just as mind-opening as Crip Camp, and that we all need to work to open up the, as Nicole likes to call it, the on-ramp to access to doing these things. And certainly as a filmmaker with a disability, I've been working within the industry to really promote the fact that when you're talking about diversity and you're not including people with disabilities, you're really missing the boat completely. And when I brought that up to certain organizations, they've responded really, really well. And so I think just to kind of close all of that out, the one other thing I want to say is that we have been building a very robust impact campaign for the film around education, around trying to bring people together, old activists, new ones, trying to find a way to really support the community. And one of the great things that we all feel really wonderful is the fact that we're working with Andrea and Stacy, who certainly bring up the disability justice perspective in a way that I can't imagine anybody doing better. And I would just say that it has just been really, it's been important to us, but it's been so freaking exciting too, because we're seeing all these connections happening in art and educational materials coming together. And oh my gosh, I get to actually be on a panel with Anita. Anita, I've been following you on Facebook for a long time. I've never even heard your voice. So I'm so happy to be here with you. So that's my answer.
Oh boy.
Can I comment on that real quick?
Yes, please do.
I'm also having like a oh moment because like I follow my Lissa on Twitter. And so I'm like, whoa, I get to talk to her. Also, I'd like to say a quick thing about like something that I love about like transness and disability activism is that there's this beautiful little overlap between them where like transness is like, I'm gender fluid and I use they them pronouns and I need to tell people that every single time I introduce myself. And I also have ADHD and I also have to explain to like everyone I work with that like I have accommodations that I need. Like if I don't have an external structure to help me, I fall apart. And so there's this nice little overlap where like when you're part of the trans community and you're also part of the disability community, you also have that like same like you can converse about your accommodations. And that's just like a normal thing in those communities that like you can ask someone to respect you in that way and that like people understand that language and it's already there. Like there's already this base overlap that everyone deserves access to bathrooms and that like trans people have been fighting for gender neutral bathrooms and that like people in the disability community have been fighting for accessible bathrooms as well. So it's like, oh, we're in this together and like our communities have so much in common and I love that.
Thank you.
I think one of the wonderful things that we've noticed about Crip Camp is that when we talk about the Black Panthers coming in and feeding the people during the sit-in, that so many people didn't know that story at all. A, they don't know the sit-in story. B, they don't know the participation of the Black Panthers. And most people know about the Black Panthers is very, very negative things. But as Corbett says in the film, of course we're here. We're both trying to make the world a better place. I guess I don't have anything really to say after that, but it's just, yes, these intersections happen.
Yeah, and I love hearing about that. Like, yeah, again, like people like in high school still teach the Black Panthers as like a negative thing and going to college. I got to learn about like the Black Panther helping out the 504 sit-in. I was like, that's so cool. I love when organizations come together to get things done and like just help. I just think when people help each other, it's just really beautiful and neat. Like I just get really excited over that. Oh man.
Melissa, were you gonna say something?
Yeah, I think that, for me to see that part, and have it expounded upon so well. Like Corbett's comment kind of struck me, and I was watching it again with a friend. You know, it was like, why are you helping us? And it's like, why not? Why wouldn't the Black Panther Party help disabled folks, you know, have a successful, you know, sit in and be, you know, a part of the movement? And I think that shows in some ways, you know, our own ignorance when we may have certain perspectives about certain movements, certain groups, and the work that they do and how that could be more inclusive into our work. So I really like the comment that Corbett said, because it shows that we're all in this fight together, and we all have to come together to ensure that, you know, it's not just about protecting one set of rights, it's about protecting all of our rights. Because if you're not protecting everyone, then your work is going to fail. You know, you cannot say that you're successful in anything if you're going to leave a group of people behind. Like I always say, you know, to folks, you know, in the Black community, when, you know, I have these conversations, as well as within the disabled community, your work would not be complete if you try to leave Black disabled folks or disabled people of color out. You know, all of us are a part of this, and all of us need to be seen and heard. And if your movement can assist in the work that's being done, then do that. That's, you know, for me, being a co-conspirator, being a comrade, you know, in the fight for justice and equality.
Right on, right on.
Yeah.
Miss Anita, I actually have a story. I'm from Chicago, and in my neighborhood that I was born in, I lived down the street from where the Black Panthers had their breakfast program. So, you know, and I didn't find out, you know, I was busy being, you know, a young child during the 504 sit-ins. And I didn't learn that the Black Panthers had been involved and you know, had helped feed, you know, those protesters. And it seems to me it had even a deeper involvement, that story needs to be told. Um, and I didn't learn about that until, oh my goodness, I was probably in my 30s or thereabouts. And so I'm really glad that the story of the Black Panthers is in Crip Camp. I think the story of the Black Panthers' involvement really, really needs to be, you know, really, it should just be a start, because, you know, yeah, because my whole thing has been over the past few years of our stories being whitewashed. That, you know, when they tell the story of the ADA, of the Americans with Disabilities Act, you know, the participation of Blacks in particular, you know, seem to be left out. And I think that that's things that we can work on now in the future, of talking, you know, about the diversity and intersectionality of the disability community, and how more the participation of other marginalized communities, you know, factor in. So yeah.
Yes, yes. Oh, this is giving me so much life. Okay, I'm going to move to the next question. So this is kind of for any of you. I was thinking initially Anita and Jim, but I think any of you could speak to this. So Crip Camp highlights two very significant successful moments in disability rights. So we have the 504 success, and then we have the ADA. However, disabled advocates throughout the years have also fought for the right to fail. What are some mistakes that you've made in organizing that have really shaped who you are today? And, or how do these shape your organizing work after that?
I mean, I would just give a little bit of anecdotal information, and then talking to some people that were involved with CIL at the beginning. They certainly said that, I heard, you know, we were a brand new movement, and our thrust was very much to get people out of institutions And at times, our advocacy to get people to live independently didn't always work out for the best. I mean, if you're, I don't know what kind of percentage that they were talking about, but indeed, any movement in which you're really trying to change the status quo, you don't want to make mistakes, you don't want to harm people, but that to change things, there are going to be some unintended consequences, and that you look for those, but you also accept that that could happen when you are in the position of actually having to invent the wheel.
Oh man, I did so much wheel inventing when I was younger.
Well, also when you're younger, you don't have the amount of time on the planet to like grow your social, your community, right? And especially when you're marginalized on a couple of different levels, it's hard to know that you're not the only one. And so many, I think especially some of the older folks with disabilities, we really did feel like we were the only one. I was the only one with a disability in my school for years, and finally when there was somebody, I really didn't relate to them. And it wasn't because I didn't like people in wheelchairs. It just, sometimes you just don't relate to people.
Yeah.
So,
oh my God, there's so many people who have been like, oh, I need you to meet like my trans friend. You'll get along with them so great. Like,
yeah.
After this panel, no one requests me. This happens a lot to me personally, but like every time I like talk in a place, adults are like, "Oh, I have a younger trans kid in my life. Could you talk to them? They don't have anyone." And I'm like, "What? Wait."
You are the sole representative for all. Yeah.
Yes.
All the time. Yeah.
Yeah. I've talked to so many of my friends, like little siblings, about so many different things. Cause I don't do just like queer stuff and disability. Like I used to also be really into like providing sex education to young people, and I would do a lot of research and have a lot of conversations with people about that. So yeah, like I definitely like an important part of activism is also just like being a person people can just talk to about things. And when it happens organically, I love doing that. Like I love having those conversations. But when people like push identities, like identity people like to me, I'm like, this is not this feels very tokenizing and not very fun.
So, Vilissa, I know Sam spoke to this a little bit earlier, but when you think about the concept of kind of the utopic experience and Crip Camp speaking to the power of community, where have you found similar kind of experiences like that? Or if you feel like you haven't, what have been the challenges around kind of finding a space that feels like these people get me, they know me, we're, just kindred?
I think for me, that kindred feeling comes when I meet other Black disabled folks, particularly Black women and femmes, because I know some of us always share how we don't feel seen or safe in either community, and we feel seen or safe with each other. So I think that it's really important to recognize how for some of us, there is no community that really sees us fully. We may have comrades or co-conspirators in each community that that do get it, where we are safe and seen, but that's not the overall field. I know that when I particularly started to talk about race more, and especially when the hashtag came out on disability to white, that was really the first time, I was called the N-word and by other white disabled folks. So it just really showed me how even in a community that is marginalized, there's still this hierarchy of whose lives and experiences are more important, and how many of us don't feel safe. So I think that when I'm in community with Black women and femmes, and I'm very particular about that because, I'm safe. I feel safe around us. There's not the male gaze or not really a lot of sexualizing in that type of community. It's just us being vulnerable and being real because there are issues that, you know, black femmes, trans women, all of us share that just so unique to us, and to be in spaces where we get it and we don't have to explain beyond whatever story that we have is so powerful. And I like being in a space where I don't have to explain. Like, yes, girl, I understand. Just that whole perspective there. And one thing that I love is having and knowing, and I hope Anita don't feel offended by me calling her elder, but elders like her who, have paved the way for me. It's so humbling to know them. Like when I got to meet Anita 2 years ago, I was so excited because I'm like, you know, for me, she's so larger than life, in what she has done in putting her Black disabled feminine body on the line, in ways that I could never do, and to be so unapologetically her and to know, just a snippet of what she's been through, that gives me energy to continue on the work that she and so many others of her generation and before her has done. So just meeting, folks like Anita and folks like you, Andrea and everyone else, had just been so impactful to my own experience in finding, kinship, sisterhood, femihood amongst each other. And I think that our community has to do a better job in not seeing those of us who gravitate towards those spaces as isolating or being aggravated about that. It's just a sense of community and knowing that, yes, we may have other identities in different spaces, but sometimes you need people who look like you in almost every way for you to really feel seen and heard and protected and loved and supported, and to not feel like there's something wrong with those of us who seek those spaces intentionally. I can be in disability spaces, but I also know where my true home is.
Oh, yes. Yes, yes. I'm with you. So one thing that I want to kind of ask that I think is relevant, again, to any of you, I'm thinking, Anita, about some of conversations that we've had in terms of cross-disability organizing and like what that looks like now compared to even perhaps, when you first started in ADAPT, and anyone else, just thoughts around cross-disability organizing in your lifetime.
Well, this is Anita. It's certainly changed. I mean, when I joined ADAPT, I was probably one of only a handful or so of people who walked, and but also had disabilities. Uh, and it took a while. It took some growing. If you will, part of it was kind of organic. Part of it, I mean, because we definitely were an organization that was seen to be pretty much for people in wheelchairs only. And because of the um, perceptions that if you walk and you don't have any visible disabilities, that somehow you're in leadership or whatever, um, they had to kind of clamp down on that and direct people to folks in wheelchairs, folks with, other or more significant disabilities, to say, listen to me. I'm here, as well. I'm affected, by this, you know, uh, nobody who is non-disabled needs to be speaking for me. Um, and then as ADAPT grew larger, more people with other, disabilities uh, came in, joined, and so we had, you know, uh, people, with who were blind, or people who were deaf, or people with intellectual and developmental disabilities, people on, you know, the autism spectrum. And I think as the decades grew and as we learned, you know, it's really, really important to have cross disability organizing, because if we don't come together, I mean, first off, we don't understand each other. People's disabilities are different. I think people, you know, with different disabilities, I mean, we see the world in different ways. We navigate the world.
We lost your sound again, Nita. Yes. Okay, no.
Got a loose connection.
I know.
Can't hear you, Nita.
Can't hear you.
Oh,
There you are.
oh, okay.
There you go.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
I almost feel like that Verizon commercial. And so we navigate the world in different ways. And oftentimes, if we're not careful, we in the disability community perpetuate an ableism of our own because of lack of understanding of people with different disabilities. And so, you know, we saw that it was important uh, to start working with and organizing with and collaborating with different disability groups, you know, and to be more inclusive, um, you know, within, you know, the disability community. And, you know, that led to, I think, a different, um, I think, more robust, a more, you know, bringing in, you know, people with different disabilities, you know, under, you know, into our arms, so to speak. Um, but the thing is, I think we still have to, um, we still have a ways to go. I think in cross disability organizing, because um, there still is a lot of ableism toward certain members or certain groups within the disability community. If you have, I still see people discount folks with psychiatric disabilities, or discount folks with intellectual disabilities. You know, knowing, I mean, I've worked with so many people with so many disabilities, and you know, people look at the stereotypes and they kind of believe them, and that happens even in the disability community. So I think we do have, we've got a lot to do, you know, and then, you know, not only with cross disability and disability, but going deeper and looking at how that same disability may impact us, you know, of different races or different ethnic backgrounds, or, you know, you bring the queer community, you know, into it and how that impacts us. So we still have to go a little bit deeper, because there still is now an inability, if you will, almost to talk about race. Don't bring race into the picture. People get real uncomfortable. And it seems to me that even if you say people of color and you're inclusive, sometimes people are a little more uncomfortable with the Black thing. So we have a bit of a ways to go in the disability community to really come together and to organize on a cross disability and a cross intersectional way.
Can I ask you a question?
Sure.
So Anita and Melissa, what do you think is going to make positive change? What do you think needs to happen to address the issues of racism in the disabled community?
How much time you got, Jim?
Yeah.
I understand.
Hmm.
I understand.
Alex,
I think this is what I listen. I think for me, one would be get their racist leadership out of the paint. I think we have a lot of racist leaders in our organizations that perpetuate tokenism, that perpetuate the whitewashing, the erasure, and being real about that. A lot of this leadership are still herald, and even though they have long receipts of their problematic nature, that doesn't just include racism, but also homophobia, transphobia, and the like. And that also harms Black disabled folks and other folks of color who are within these intersections. So just really being mindful of leadership. Also the culture, just really seeing how, it is the white disabled lens that is everywhere. I know I was telling folks at one point when I was looking up stock images of Black disabled women, my own photos would come up. So again, it just that visibility of the voices and understanding how tokenism works, how the imagery of Black disabled folks and other people of color are used by our organizations, to either be like a bait and switch, to say like, hey, we have people of color and our, space is very white centered and resistant to, as Anita was talking about, getting to the hard conversations and talking about race and not seeing race as a distraction, quote unquote distraction, conversation, and peace. I just, in being in this space, in just a few short years, I really see how we've made a lot of progress on the legal end as disabled folks, but the social end, we are very, very much behind. And that is very disheartening for such a diverse minority group that we are. And I just really think that, having folks like you, Jim, who's even asking these questions and who's very mindful of your own privileges and wanting to have these conversations, and even if it kind of makes you pause and check within yourself, that's so important. That self-reflection, I think that white disabled folks really need to do a lot of, and passing the mic, passing opportunities on to those of us who are not able to enter these spaces as you are is so critical. And that's just some of the things that just come to my mind, and just being honest that we do have a racism problem in this community. And that's nothing to be ashamed about. It's something to be aware of and to work towards, and know that the work isn't solely on the backs of Black disabled folks and other people of color. That is not our burden to bear. We've been bearing this burden for far too long.
Yeah. Thank you for
Anita.
that.
This Anita, I would say, and Jim, thank you for the question, really. And I got to say, honor to finally meet you in person of sorts. It's amazing. So, the last few years that I've been doing this, I mean, I saw certainly over the years and decades with ADAPT and seeing in the disability community at large. I tell, in order to explain what I'm about to say, I tell people the story of, for years, I was a disability rights activist. Okay. And then Mike Brown was murdered in Ferguson. And it hit me, or something hit me, or something stirred in me. And I stopped being a disability rights activist and became a Black disability rights activist, because I could no longer separate the two, separate those identities. And so I felt like for the longest that because white is the default for disability rights movement, disability rights. When I was doing my stuff in ADAPT, it was like, it was safe and everything to talk about disability rights. And that was it. And that was the focus, freeing our people, disability rights. But, you know, when I started talking about Black and bringing Black in, then there became a problem. And it seemed like I was being forced to choose, which are you going to be? Are you going to be a disability rights activist, or are you going to be a Black disability rights activist? And I can't separate the two because I'm Black and I'm disabled, and I'm also a queer woman, you know, so I can't separate that. But it seemed like the other stuff was fine, it was cool, but that whole Black thing presented a problem. And when I began to talk about the racial disparities and, you know, anti-Blackness and things of that nature, you know, there was, you know, this pushback, and I almost had to choose. And I still feel, you know, in a way that we, Black disability rights activists, Black disabled activists, we're put, or people try to put us in the position of choosing which are you going to be today? You know, are you going to be Black today? You know, are you going to be a woman today? Are you going to be disabled today? You know, when I walk out my door, I'm a Black disabled woman. And, you know, and personally, when people see me, depending on if I'm not, you know, if I don't have adaptive equipment, you know, or mobility equipment going on, they see somebody, you know, a cop see somebody Black, and that's who they're going to mess with, you know. And so, you know, I can't separate that from when, you know, I can't try to figure out, well, did the cop beat me up because I was Black or because I was disabled, you know, because 9 out of 10 in my case, it's because of color of my skin. So we can't separate that. So not putting us in a position of having to choose. Also, that we are the ones to tell our stories. Nobody can tell our stories like we can tell our stories. So in telling our stories, we have to be given, you know, those, you know, those, the, you know, it's harder to tell our stories because, you know, we Black folks don't have the connections to, you know, filmmakers and money, you know, and all of that stuff, you know. And so hopefully, you know, as allies can help us on that, you know, what supports or what resource or whatever we need to get our stories out there. Because a lot of the Black disabled disability rights elders are gone. They died. They're not alone. You know, they're not going to be around to tell their stories. So many folks I know who did that crawl, that Capitol crawl, you know, back in 1990, you know, are gone. You know, so many people we're losing now, you know, to COVID-19. It's imperative that we get the stories out there, and maybe that's, you know, so I think, you know, in assisting us, you know, if you will, realizing that we cannot separate our identities as Black disabled folks, realizing that we have stories to tell, and it is, and we have to be the ones to tell it, but we're going to need help from allies to get those stories out there, you know. And so that's kind of, you know, that's, you know, where I am right now. That's where, you know, people could, you know, do, you know, up, you know, lift up, you know, the stories, you know, of Blacks and folks of color, you know, in the disability rights movement. Lift those stories up. You know, remember, you know, as, I mean, you know, some folks, you know, awoke, you know, Jim, if you see some stuff going on in your presence, you know, that, you know, maybe racist or a little, you know, shady or whatever, you know, bring it up, you know, speak up it, you know, push back, you know, against that, you know, because I think a lot of times allies are afraid to speak up. You can speak up for us without speaking over us, you know, and
Yeah.
you know, and giving us, you know, opportunity and all of that. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
I am gonna try to see my screen through the tears. Like, this is just like, thank you all. I'm rather speechless, and yeah, feel you completely as a Black disabled woman. A couple more questions. We have about 15 minutes. I have a couple more questions. One is, when you think about, we know that the 30th anniversary of the ADA, of the Americans with Disabilities Act, is coming up. If there was a totally new disability rights bill, what would be in it? This is an audience question, so.
Wow.
And we got stumped fast.
I'm reading the comments, they're great. A lot of people have ideas.
Yeah, the chat is so much. I love everyone who's like in the chat today. Like everyone's so kind. And it's just all these really wild things. Like this passed by in like a half second, but someone commented that I reminded them of like their dead, like disabled trans friend, and that they were glad that I was here. And I was like, you can't just like say that casually in like a 30-second, like, oh man, everyone's got, yeah.
Yeah, what do you think? What do you think? And there was a question that asked about the ADA and what would you add to it, but recognizing, I know many feelings around that, it's thinking about if there was something new. If we were starting at where we're at in 2020, given everything that's happening in the world, right? Like, what's one thing that we feel like would be important to address?
We're putting some really good essays in here. Oh my God.
Can you?
They really are.
What are your thoughts? Well, can you share for those that aren't able to follow? Anything that you feel stands out to you?
I know someone mentioned digital accessibility, and I think that during these times especially, we see that being more and more critical for our community and in general. You know, the digital divide and the digital gap is very real, and it's still real. You know, it feels like everybody has a smartphone, but we have to realize that somebody got a smartphone, but if you live in an area that's where the signal is shaky, you might as well not have anything. So just understanding that sometimes what we take for granted, i.e. technology, is still inaccessible to a lot of people, you know, not just on the technology alone, but just the ability to have reliable connection or be able to pay, you know, for the connections, for Wi-Fi and so on and so forth. So, you know, maybe doing more work to ensure that all of us have what we need, from just the signals to, you know, ensuring that those who may require certain adaptive technical equipment can actually have that, can afford it, and make it more available for everybody.
This is Anita. I think if we were starting all over with the ADA, that there would be protection. Okay, so there would be a housing component in that, you know, I'd go so far as to like I can't remember or articulate the word I'm thinking about, but put housing in to where all housing built is built visitable. A one-step entrance, I mean, a no-step entrance, a bathroom on the first floor, you know, those things, so that people can at least visit. The right to live in the community, you know, to go even beyond Olmsted, the right not to be involuntarily incarcerated in nursing facilities or other facilities, you know, against your will. and to have the services and supports to remain in the community, you know, in such a bill. Looking at traveling, especially planes, you know, that, come on, they can send a probe to Pluto and interstellar space. Why can't they figure out a way that people can have their wheelchairs on the plane itself so that people don't have their equipment damaged, you know, or people themselves aren't hurt by these flight attendants or airline personnel who will not bother to listen to you, you know, tell them how to, you know, transfer you and all. So I would think, you know, for me, an ADA would encompass a lot of things that the present ADA doesn't have to really be a civil rights bill. And I would say that ADA would have to have funding, because right now it's pretty much an unfunded mandate. You got to have funding to pay for the ADA.
Money, that's a big one that came across multiple times. Money, so true. This is so awesome. We're at 3:07, so I'm gonna ask one more question that is for all of you all. Thinking for those of you that would be considered the younger panelists, what would you want older panelists or elders, our elders really, what do they need to learn when it comes to organizing? What do you feel like you want them to know, even as mentors? You know, what does it look like to, you know, be respectful? You know, even as elders, what would you share with them? And also kind of not being too intrusive, right? So.
Do the younger folks want to go first, or do the elders want to go first?
So the first one is for you all as younger folks, and then I'm gonna shift the question a little bit for our elders. Yes.
I think for me, and this may be a little controversial to say, but I feel that some of the older white elders, the white elders, not really want to kind of move out the way a little bit and be a little bit more progressive in their thought process, truly being intersectional in their work. I think that's some great resistance with the white elders in our community to really give space and knowing that your presence is still valuable and important, but to think about passing a torch to the younger folks. I know that, you know, me at 34, I am looking forward to the day to when I am an elder and I can pass the torch to those younger than me. And knowing that passing the torch doesn't mean that you're old news. Passing the torch meaning that the way that you did it was wonderful for that time, but there are newer ideas, newer perspectives that are equally important and need to be heard, and the visibility needs to be there. And I really think that white elders do a very bad job of this. You know, and meeting elders like Anita and other older Black folks, and not even older, you know, just in their 40s and 50s, because that's not old to me, but, you know, in the grand scheme of things for some people, you know, them understanding that and them sharing their wisdom and their stories and, you know, uplifting those of us who are younger. You know, for me, that's very powerful. And I think that maybe some communities understand that older to younger dynamic to really doing that better. I really feel that maybe older folks can really learn from the younger folks, particularly when it comes to, you know, what makes our generation different, you know, why we care about certain issues that maybe 20, 30 years ago was not an issue. You know, so just really being open-minded to the changing perspectives of disability, the stories, the experiences, knowing that some things are going to be the same, but knowing that there is going to be a shift in what is the priority, and knowing that, you know, we can, you know, roll, you know, we'll, you know, skip, jump, leap, and chew gum at the same time. You know, we can, you know, do things at, you know, more than once and, You know, if something's not your strong point, that's fine. Let the younger folks do it because they're eager to do it. I know even me at 34, I'm looking at those younger than me and figuring out, okay, what are those who are, you know, beginning their journey at under 25 especially, what are they seeing that's important and paying attention to them. So even if you are on the younger end, there's still folks who are younger than you that you can learn from and give space towards. You know, so I really think that older folks can give space to younger people and not dismiss what's important to them. And also not being so afraid of intersectionality and talking about queerness and all these things that, you know, decades ago was too taboo to do, and understanding that there's room for that now, and you're going to have to make the room or be seen as, you know, in a way, a dinosaur, and not being seen as progressive as you will want to be.
Thank you. Sam, anything else to add?
I got so much. I'm going to try to
keep it real. We got 3 minutes technically, so yes.
Yeah, like my main points would be put in the emotional labor, respect at all times, and be mindful of like boundaries with like minors and like having effective conversations about like consent. And like, because like when you're a youth activist, you don't realize like when you're young, like how much you're mentally putting yourself through when you're doing these tasks. Like I had to, like I was literally like in high school, like I didn't really get to have a senior year because I was like doing LGBT activism as the president of my Gender Sexuality Alliance. So I spent my weeks, instead of like going out and having fun, I was emailing like my principal and talking to the school board, and I was organizing things. And that like took away from my ability to experience youth. So like a huge part of it is you got to recognize that like there is an emotional labor to putting someone younger through this kind of stuff. So like specifically talking about like really young people, like it's include people that young into activism, but it's also super important that they need to be mindful about what they're putting themselves through. But yeah, also just like, again, like respect, like talk to them like they are a person and that they know what they're talking about, because I was 17 years old and I was explaining the word and definition of transgender, and I was explaining like accommodations to people when I was 17, and I was doing it in such an adult like way, and I had to be so certain of myself for every single second that I was talking to get people to believe me. And that like, and that I knew my I knew my stuff basically. So like believe young people, respect them, emotional labor.
Thank you. Awesome. So I do not want to be the last voice that people hear. So there were a couple quick questions that I think from an impact campaign for Crip Camp that I can address. One is around, somebody asked about educational resources. We do have an education team that is amazing, that is working on some amazing lesson plans. Just blow your mind, amazing. And those will be released in the coming months. A lot of you are asking about community and just things like that. And when I tell you follow at Crip Camp Film, we have so many amazing things coming up, just that you'll be seeing over the next few weeks, just in terms of really coming together, even given these virtual, now the access that we have virtually. What does Crip Camp look like in 2020? We're gonna be thinking through that and really gonna have some more engaging conversations, opportunities to connect. And it's really gonna be so great, and we're so excited to continue to engage with you as an impact team. With that, I am leaving this with James, because you have it right here, Jim. I'm like, Joyce James, Jim and Anita. What do you want to leave with those that are younger? What do young people need to learn? And how can young people also, when it comes to just even respect, are there any things that you just want to share with us or leave with us? We would love, Jim, I'd love for you to go first, and Anita, if you would close us out, that would be great. Thank you all so much. This has been an honor. We do have there's a third conversation next week on it's going to focus on organizing around COVID-19 that my dear Stacy Park is going to be moderating. We're so grateful for you all. Jim and Anita.
And Nicole, co-director Nicole Noonan.
We'll be on that, yes.
We'll be on that one, yeah. To answer your question, I mean, outside of what I kind of said earlier about even small things like speaking up are really, ways to get going, and that sometimes you really find a groove and you start building your activism. I don't think I've got in just kind of hearing Sam and Melissa talk and reading things on the chat here. I think you all got it. I mean, I think you have it. I really do. And I have a great deal of faith and trust because, us older generation, we were your age 30, 40 years ago. And for me to have any different expectation for you would be just about the most ill-informed thing I could say. So just keep going.
So this is Anita, and I totally agree with Jim in that y'all young activists are on fire. Y'all kick ass. By Lisa, I follow your work, and I'm just amazed at just the awesome stuff you managed to do in just this short amount of time that you've been doing it in. So, I would say for the younger folks, don't be afraid. Have patience with yourself. Pace yourself. And don't be, afraid to, don't be afraid to teach us elders. Have patience with us, but we want to learn too. I mean, there wasn't such things as computers and everything, when I was starting to do this, and certainly when Jim was starting to do this. So, teach us. We want to learn from you. We need to learn from you. Share us your energy and just keep on being badass and kick ass.
That's the affirmation.
Thank you all so much. I know this has been recorded and you'll get follow-up. And we hope to see you in a couple weeks. Actually, it's 2 weeks. I said next week, but it's next week, the 25th, next week. Thank you all. Take care.
Bye.
Thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you for listening.
Yes,
Y'all
thank
rock.
you.
Bye, Mom. Bye, Dad. Thanks for watching.
Y'all have a good Saturday.